Something shifted about 3 months ago, and you probably did not even notice it happen. The thoughts that used to keep you up at night stopped coming. The temptation that had been knocking on your door every single day went quiet. The anxiety that had been sitting on your chest every morning when you opened your eyes just was not there anymore, and you exhaled, finally. You told yourself this was the breakthrough you had been waiting for. You told yourself the warfare was over. You told yourself God had finally brought you into a place of rest, and you deserved it because you had fought hard, and you had stayed faithful, and now the enemy had given up and moved on to someone easier. And that feeling, that exhale, that finally is exactly what I need to warn you about today. Because here is what nobody prepares you for. The most dangerous moment in your spiritual life is not when the enemy is screaming at you. It is when he goes completely silent. The church teaches you to recognize attack. You have heard the sermons. You know the language. Spiritual warfare, fiery darts, the schemes of the enemy. Stand firm, resist the devil, and he will flee. You have been taught to identify the pressure and push back against it, and when the pressure lifts, you have been taught to call that victory. And sometimes it is victory. I am not dismissing that. But there is another reason the pressure lifts that almost nobody talks about, and it is not victory, and it is not rest, and it is not a reward for your faithfulness, and the moment you mistake it for any of those things, you are in more danger than you have ever been. I want to tell you about a man named Marcus. He had been a believer for 11 years, deeply committed, the kind of person who showed up early and stayed late, who led a small group on Tuesday nights, who had a prayer life that most people in his church would have envied if they knew about it. For 3 years, he had been in what he described as the most intense spiritual battle of his life. Temptation in his thought life, conflict in his marriage, a pull back toward a version of himself he thought he had left behind for good. He fought it constantly. He prayed through it. He fasted through it. He called his closest friend at midnight more than once and said, "I am not okay. I need you to pray with me right now." And then one day it just stopped. He told me later, it was like someone turned off the noise. Everything just went quiet. He said he felt something he had not felt in 3 years. He felt normal. He stopped calling his friend at midnight because he did not need to anymore. He stopped fasting because the urgency was gone. He still went to church, still led his group, still read his Bible most mornings, but the intensity dropped away. And honestly, he said, it felt good. It felt like peace. It felt like he had finally come out the other side of something. 18 months later, his marriage was in pieces. He had walked back into the exact thing he had spent 3 years fighting, and he was sitting in my car in a parking lot at 11 at night saying, "I do not understand how I got here." I did not make one big decision to walk away. I just woke up one day, and I was already gone. And I need you to understand what happened to Marcus, because it is not a rare story. It is one of the most common stories I have ever encountered in people who started well and somewhere in the middle lost the thread without ever feeling the moment it slipped through their fingers. Here is what the Bible actually says about this, and I need you to hear this carefully, because this is the part that most Sunday morning sermons skip entirely. In Luke chapter 11, Jesus tells a story about an unclean spirit that leaves a person. The spirit wanders through dry places looking for rest and finds none and decides to go back. And when it returns, it finds the house swept clean and put in order. And then Jesus says something that should stop every believer cold. He says the spirit goes and brings 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they move in, and the final condition of that person is worse than the first, swept clean, put in order. That sounds like victory. That sounds like exactly what you want your spiritual house to look like. And Jesus is describing it as the setup for devastation. The swept clean house is not the problem. The empty house is the problem. Because here is what nobody tells you about spiritual warfare. The enemy does not fear a clean life. He fears a full one. He does not retreat because you have tidied up your behavior. He retreats when the presence of God is so occupying every room that there is no space for him to return to. And if you swept the house without filling it, if you cleaned up your life without deepening your connection to the one who needs to inhabit it, then what you are living in right now is not a sanctuary. It is a vacancy. And this is where it gets dangerous, because I want to tell you the 3 specific reasons the enemy goes quiet, and none of them are what you want to hear. The first reason he stops attacking you is that you have become comfortable enough that he no longer needs to. Think about what attack actually is. Attack is resistance, and resistance only happens when something is moving in a direction the enemy wants to stop. A parked car does not need brakes. Brakes are for a car that is going somewhere. If you have settled, if your faith has become routine rather than pursuit, if your prayer life has become a habit rather than a hunger, if your relationship with God has become familiar in the way that a piece of furniture is familiar, rather than intimate in the way that a living relationship is intimate, then you are not a threat that requires active opposition. You are already where the enemy wants you, still in church, still using the right language, still believing in your head, but no longer dangerous, no longer moving, no longer the kind of person whose faith has enough momentum to pull anyone else along with it. The attack stopped not because you won. It stopped because the threat you represented stopped first. The second reason is harder. He stops attacking you when you have drifted far enough that he can simply wait. There is a moment in every slow drift away from God where the enemy makes a strategic decision. He has been pushing and prodding and tempting, and you have been resisting, and it has been costing him effort. And then he does the math and realizes that the drift is already happening on its own. The busyness is doing his work. The comfort is doing his work. The gradual substitution of spiritual activity for genuine spiritual intimacy is doing his work. And so he stops. He pulls back. He lets the current carry you. And the terrifying thing about a slow drift is that it feels like stillness. You are not running away. You are not making dramatic, rebellious choices. You are just floating. And floating feels peaceful right up until you look up and realize how far from shore you actually are. The third reason is the one that should make you sit up straight right now. Sometimes he stops attacking you because he is preparing something you are not ready for. He is not done. He is patient. He is strategic in a way that most people deeply underestimate. He watched you fight, and he learned you. He saw what almost broke you 3 years ago, and he cataloged it. He let you win the smaller battle so you would relax your defenses before the larger one. A lion does not chase its prey until it tires and then rest. It gets still. It gets patient. It waits for exactly the right moment when the prey has settled and stopped scanning the horizon and stopped listening for the sound of something moving through the grass. And then it moves. I know someone is watching this right now, and the hair on the back of their neck is standing up. Not because what I'm saying is new to you, because somewhere underneath the surface of your comfortable, relatively okay, nothing particularly wrong life, you already know. You have known for a while. You just did not have words for it. I need to tell you something from my own life, and I am not proud of this, but I think it matters. There was a period of about 14 months where I felt genuinely fine. Not on fire, not in crisis, just fine, steady, functional. I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was just not doing any of it with any particular urgency or hunger or awareness that it needed to be anything more than what it was. And I remember the specific morning I realized what had happened. I was sitting in what should have been prayer, and I was actually just sitting. Not talking to God, not listening, just sitting in a quiet room feeling like that counted. And I thought, when did this become enough for me? When did I stop wanting more than this? And the honest answer was that I could not remember. It had not happened in a day. It had happened in 14 months of small surrenders to comfort that I had dressed up as maturity. I almost lost something in that season that I cannot name precisely, but that I would have spent the rest of my life missing. So what does dangerous silence actually look like in an ordinary life? Not in a dramatic spiritual crisis. In a normal Tuesday. It looks like opening your Bible and reading the words without any of them landing anywhere. It looks like praying the same way you send a text you are not sure will be received. It looks like going through an entire day without a single moment where God felt genuinely close or genuinely real. It looks like the things that used to convict you no longer producing any particular response. It looks like worship feeling like a preference rather than a necessity. It looks like the hunger being gone. And this is the thing that makes it so hard to catch in yourself. Peace and sedation feel almost identical from the inside. God's peace is a settled security that comes from genuine nearness. Satan's sedation is a numbing comfort that comes from genuine distance. And in both cases, you feel okay. In both cases, the noise has stopped. In both cases, you are not in distress. The only way to tell the difference is to ask one honest question. Is the okayness coming from being full or from being empty enough that you stopped noticing you were hungry? Because a man who just ate a meal and a man who has been starving long enough that his body stopped sending hunger signals can look exactly the same from the outside. They can both tell you they are fine, but only one of them is telling the truth. So what do you do when you realize you have been in the dangerous silence? You do not panic. Panic is not the answer, and fear is not the goal. The goal is alertness. There is a difference between a soldier who is afraid of the enemy and a soldier who respects the enemy enough to stay awake and stay armed and never for a single second mistake the quiet for safety. Alertness looks like bringing genuine honesty back to your prayer life before anything else changes, not performing prayer. Praying the thing you are actually thinking. God, I think I have drifted. God, I do not feel anything right now, and I am not sure when that started. God, I have been going through the motions for so long that the motions started to feel like the real thing. That kind of prayer does not sound impressive, but it is the kind that tears something open in the right direction. Alertness looks like getting around people who are still hungry when you have stopped being hungry, because hunger is contagious in a way that comfort is not. Alertness looks like choosing the thing that costs you something over the thing that costs you nothing, not as punishment, but because you remember that the things worth having have always cost something, and the moment you stopped paying anything was probably around the same time things went quiet. And alertness looks like taking the silence seriously, not as evidence that everything is fine, as a question worth asking. Why is it quiet? What is not happening that should be happening? What did I stop doing that I used to do? And what did I start tolerating that I used to fight? There is a moment coming in your life, I do not know when. It might be close, where the silence ends, where whatever has been patient gets impatient, where the thing that pulled back to let the drift happen decides the drift has gone far enough and moves. And the only thing that determines what that moment costs you is where you are standing when it arrives. Are you standing in a swept and empty house that has been unoccupied long enough to forget what it felt like when it was full? Or are you standing in something inhabited, something occupied, something so full of what matters that there is genuinely no room for what is coming? The most dangerous words you can say right now are, I am fine. Not because being fine is wrong, but because fine is where drift happens. Fine is where the quiet settles in and gets comfortable. Fine is where the enemy does some of his most patient and most devastating work. So let me ask you something before you close this video and go back to your fine life. When was the last time your faith cost you something? When was the last time you were genuinely hungry rather than merely habitual? When was the last time the silence felt like a question rather than an answer? If you cannot remember, that is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to move. Right now, today. Not with a dramatic overhaul, but with one honest conversation with God that sounds less like a prayer you have memorized and more like a person who just realized they have been sleepwalking and is choosing to wake up. Leave a comment below and tell me honestly where you are right now, not where you think you should be, where you actually are, because someone else is going to read your comment and realize they are not alone in the quiet. Share this with someone who seems fine. Because sometimes the people who seem most fine are the ones who most need someone to say the silence is worth examining. Subscribe, because what is coming next goes even deeper than this, and if this video woke something up in you, then next week is going to matter to you. The enemy is not afraid of your clean life. He is afraid of your full one. Fill the house.